All right. We are going to start talking about the anger retaliation rapist. And I'm planning on trying to get through this so I can uh, get both this and um, sadistic in the same one. But if not, that's all right. We'll finish it up later. So, that being said, what we can talk about with anger retaliation, it is much different other than the aspect of rape that's involved, much different than your power reassurance. So, unpredictable. You guys can read these, brief and violent. Uh, and some things I want to point out here, like as you can see, it's unpredictable. It is very spontaneous in the sense of an opportunity presents itself, and they are in a particular mood to do so. Well, then that's what is going to happen. Now, if it comes to brief and violent, um, they see, since anger retaliation rapists, they basically have a general hatred towards, since most of them attack females, most of them have a hatred towards women in general. Whether it be because they were abused by mothers when they were young. In fact, most of the people that fit this category were, physically abused or even sexually, but usually physically abused by their mothers, fathers, both. There was definitely physical abuse, and if it was by a father, the mother basically did nothing to stop it. Um, so their goal is to, part of their goal is to be very violent towards the victim, and that's why you see on here excessive force is used. It is, meant to cause harm. It is meant to completely just dominate, and the violence itself is actually what drives some of that sexual excitement for them. You know, being able to control someone, be able to cause that kind of pain, physical pain and anguish on someone, fits into that whole idea of being, like I said, a brief, violent, excessive force. They are not into the whole process of it. They just like the the excitement of that moment to where they can unleash their hatred, and their combination of hatred and sexual gratification they can get from not just the physical part they do, because you'll find out they use their hands, in essence fists, they kick, uh, they sometimes will use other weapons like, knives and stuff, but not so much. They prefer the hands-on type of punishment, um, and pain that they cause. Um, it's not quite sadistic because there's a different aspect to it. We'll get to that, but definitely excessive force, definitely brief, and that's one big difference between this and sadistic. This will be brief. They just want to kind of let this area or this aspect vent, um, and so yeah, that I think covers that. Degradation, humiliation. So also, another thing that feeds into their little uh, gratification that they get, the sexual gratification that they get, is not necessarily from the sex, once again, um, but the use of language like profanity and things like that. That heightens their experience. Being able to degrade someone is another one. So degradation, humility is big to them. So a lot of times, if it's a sense of degradation, humility, they will. A lot of times that will involve, not only if it's a male and female situation, um, it will involve both vaginal and anal sex, and obviously with males it'll be anal, but they'll do that. An example of something that a anger retaliation rapist may do is, I don't want to get too graphic with it, but either way, basically if they rape a woman, they'll also, after he's raped her anally, he will make her perform oral sex on him. Um, right, immediately following that. So because to them that is degrading. Also, going back to the whole weapon thing, they don't use the weapon as just a threat, but they don't use it during the attack in terms of like harming the person. But if they do use, say, a knife, they use that to cut clothes off of the victim, to add to kind of uh, the stress and fear of the whole thing for the victim. Okay. Um, as I stated before, tends to be spontaneous. Main goal, even though they do get some sexual gratification from it, their goal is not sexual pleasure, which is the vast majority of, like I said before, in most rape cases, it's not about the sex. But the goal here for anger retaliation is simply to be able to show exert force over somebody, the violent force, um, and uh, anything anything that shows that type of dominance, to them is what they're after, not that sexual pleasure. Um, they tend to pick victims who are once again within their own race. Um, they tend to pick victims who are either their own age or slightly older than them. Okay, so um, just it has to do with a domination thing. Also has to do, depending on how much older. It can relate to, if it's a little bit older or at least close to the same age, it's usually more so the anger and violence that would otherwise be directed at a spouse or whoever they're with, which, by the way, they do not typically um, attack their own spouse or partner. They save that or reserve that for their victims of rape. Um, so they'll do that. But then those who have more anger towards in their own mind and resentment towards their own mother, they may pick older female victims. So it just depends on where that anger for them is coming from and who they feel like they need to show retaliation for or against, if that makes sense. Okay. Um, they tend to pick people that live nearby, like close to their home. This person fits more into, even though it does say on here that they tend to be spontaneous, they tend to be closer personality wise to the organized non-social offender because they can travel. They are typically athletic. They go to bars. They consider themselves really masculine, like a lot of machismo. Um, Chauvinistic would be another way of saying it. Chauvinistic pigs, if you want to call it that. This is a kind of mentality because they hate women, but they may still be with a female. It's that concept that they have all those things that kind of get put together to make them more likely to be, like I said, this anger retaliation type. They typically come from homes of, broken homes, which is common, unfortunately, for all these categories we're talking about. Education actually isn't that high. You're looking at maybe, freshman, ninth grade, whatever you want to call it. Excuse me. They tend to pick jobs. So going back to the power reassurance, they had menial jobs. Anger retaliation will pick jobs that are more action oriented, whether it be firemen, whether it be anything that is considered to be much more action related. So we have, like I said, that's something else to be considering. And remember, it's an expression of anger this anger and violence that they are basically letting out. And see here, anything else I should probably tell you about? Okay, so here is one. I said some categories of rape can be really short in between intervals, just like the power reassurance is really short, 1 to 2 weeks. Well, anger retaliation rapists, I say only, any rape is bad. They have a much longer cooling off period than, say, the power reassurance. Anger retaliation tend to have they're basically have a cooling off period of around 6 months to a year, somewhere in that range. So definitely months between their different rapes. Something else that's degrading that they tend to do, I already mentioned the whole anal and then going into uh, oral sex immediately following anal. They will also, or going back to that and ejaculate in the victim's face, because they feel that that's degrading. Okay, so um, that's essentially what we're looking at with anger retaliation. So I think just to be safe on time, I think I could get in the last part about power assertive rapists, but I think I want to wait on that. So I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it up with anger retaliation. Just remember, like I said, the stuff that's here on the screen, I don't think there's anything else that I need to show you guys. The anger retaliation, though, is unpredictable, brief, and violent. Definitely think about it's, for one, brief and violent. They just want to get that violence out of the way. They're not there to enjoy the sex or anything like that. It's just used as a weapon, essentially, an opportunity for them to harm someone physically while they're also um, being able to have some sexual gratification from that. Um, and the big thing is sexual pleasure isn't the goal. So that being said, like I said, next time. Earlier I said power assertive rapist, but I think what we're going to do is skip on to the sadistic. If I have time, I'll come back to power assertive, but we'll see how we do. All right, I will talk to you guys later then, and until then, just be safe as I normally tell you. So take it easy.